Hi, this is Daniel Jaramillo with SP Developments, and today our guest is Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. Thank you very much, Peter, for being here.
Daniel, it's my pleasure.
Okay, great. Um, Let me start by introducing Peter a little bit of what I know from him, and then you can give us a little bit more color to it. I know that, or let me start how I met Peter. As
Okay.
a matter of fact, which is a better story. I remember. I don't know if this was the first time I saw you, but is the time that I remember the most because we were drinking a couple of beers near downtown, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And you were discussing how the market was going to absolutely crash back in 2006, I guess. And I was trying to convince you that it wasn't. so that was the first time that I was absolutely wrong, and Peter was absolutely right. And I still kick myself to this day for not following his advice back then. And he did give me the direct advice of what to do and what's going to happen and how bad things were already and how bad things were going to turn. Do you recall more or less I'm guessing you had this conversation with many people though, but do you recall those beers?
I do recall those beers, and I do recall they were much cheaper than they are today.
Oh, that's
I mean,
right.
if you go into a bar today, you're looking at $9
Oh, yeah.
for a beer, which is just insane. I think back in the day, what were they? $3?
No, I know.
And back then, I mean, the good part is that people don't realize when a market starts to change, everything goes down in value. I like to say, if you want to know what's going on in the economy, watch the happy hours. Any restaurant that's offering a lot of happy hours, they're trying to bring in cash flow. So they're simply trying to bring in some cash so they can keep everything going. The restaurants that are doing very well, the economy's doing very well, there's no happy hours. So anybody who wants to be an economist at home, watch the happy hours.
Absolutely. That takes me. So I love the way that Peter explains things because he comes from, again, you're a baseball fan, right? So,
Yep.
And you follow, love statistics, love
Yep.
numbers.
Yep.
And
Yep.
everything is based on data, which
Yep.
is what I started loving that about you. So, because then I'm like, okay, I'm going to listen to this guy. And because that was the first, it's not just like a sentiment or anything. It's like backed by data. And what you ended up doing in the way how you got into the spotlight was because you had a story. If I'm not mistaken, you used the data from I-95 East
Yep.
on all condos, and you were tracking building by building what was going on with the sales, what was going on with the listings, all this data that you used to predict what eventually happened, and it happened exactly how you said it. I don't know how many months in advance you were able to predict that, but you were, and I remember one particular story that I like. I don't recall if I think you used the word like the crash or the epicenter of this earthquake, financial earthquake in the real estate industry was Miami, that epicenter. And as a matter of fact, didn't you mention one particular building? I keep telling that story, which is the Brickell View.
Yep.
Do you recall that one?
Yep.
With a VUE. So it was a
V or the view or the VU if you want to be
or
if
the
you want to be
VU.
bougie.
Right, exactly. So, but what ended up happening is people would, the underwriters for mortgages would give out these crazy mortgages where $800,000 for a property that was worth maybe, 300, 400,000, and then they dropped all the way down to 180,000. Right? Do you recall those days? So
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you if you think about the view, and anybody who doesn't know where it is, it's in greater downtown Miami. It's in the Brickell Avenue area off of Coral Way and Brickell Avenue. And one beds were going for 60 grand a door, 60 grand a unit. Two beds were about 109, depending on which view you had. Now, this is an apartment building that they converted into a condo because the market was robust. They dumped it off to a bunch of people who were dropping 400 grand a door
Yeah.
for maybe a one bed or so. And next thing you know, they retreated all the way back. I took the New York Times photographer. They were doing a story about the crash in Miami. I took a photographer in to view the building, and maybe this was an omen. They actually have a 13th floor that's marked. Most buildings in South Florida, they don't say 13 because there's some kind of superstition about the 13. They actually
Right.
was 13, so you could see that. But they were unscrewing every other light bulb in the hallways to try to conserve energy. The valet had disappeared. A lot of the security cameras were turned off. You couldn't get in the swimming pool. Why? Because nobody was paying the maintenance.
Yeah.
because everybody was basically losing their condos, and the ones who were in the process of losing their condos, what they would do is they would rent it out to somebody short term,
Yeah.
just try to get some cash flow in, which is why a lot of the porn industry back in the day, and I don't know if I could say that on your podcast, but the porn industry
Yeah.
became very active, and they would reach out and try to lease places for shoots, and they were offering, if memory serves me correct, like $2,500 for the day to shoot some porn in these condos, which were all vacant, and landlords wanted cash flow.
Of course. Okay. No,
So that's where we were.
Crazy days.
Yes,
Crazy days.
Crazy days.
So that takes me to your latest interview. I don't know if it was your latest, but I just saw you on CNBC.
Yep.
And you were discussing something that's, I don't want to say similar. It's different, but it's concerning, or it's similarly concerning, which is the 40 years recertification that buildings need to undergo.
But 40 years was back in the day. Now we got a bunch more layers on top of that. 40 years is old school. This is like the OG or whatever you want to call it.
Okay. But can you tell us a little bit more about it? So more in depth than what you
Yep.
described in CNBC, so people get a little bit more understanding.
100%. So let's get in time machine, and we're going to go back. We're going to go back to June of 2021. June of 2021, we got the pandemic hitting. Everything is going crazy. Lo and behold, the state of Florida decides to take a very optimistic approach and say, you don't have to wear a mask. And if you come down here, you can twerk on a police car. So we make all kinds of national headlines because all the spring breakers are down here twerking the police cars. There's all this and that going on. In and around that time, there's a tower, old building in Surfside. Surfside's a community, small community, located on the barrier island of Miami-Dade County. So you got the Atlantic, you got the barrier island, you got the bay or the intercoastal, and then you got the mainland. So this little community with not a lot of regulatory guidance because they don't have the funds to pay for everything. This little building in this little community of Surfside, it collapses. 98 people die, $1 billion settlements paid out. Feds say, well, we understand and we trust the local governing bodies to go ahead and do an investigation, but we're going to launch our own investigation. So they launched this federal investigation because they don't want another tower collapsing. And as a result of that, the Florida legislature has made a number of changes since June of 2021 to try to ensure that no more condominium towers collapse. Now, keep in mind what market we're talking about. State of Florida, 67 counties, 23 million people or so. We have about 28,250 associations, and we have 1.2 million units.
Wow.
Now, this does not include rentals. These are simply buildings.
These are just condos.
These are just condos.
Okay.
So of that, Tri-County of Miami-Dade to the south, Broward County to the middle and the center, and Palm Beach County to the north, you're looking at 13,000 associations, 610,000 units.
Wow.
So basically half of all of the supply of condos is going to be located in South Florida.
Okay.
So why is that important? Well, the reason that's important is we don't have state income tax. And because we don't have to have state income tax, the way the coffers for the various entities are paid for is going to be by property taxes. Property taxes in the state of Florida are 2% of the value. If you own a property and you claim it as yours as a homestead, you get to lock in exactly how much the tax can go up. So where am I kind of going with this? Well, what happens is the school board takes about a third of your 2% property tax, the county takes a third, and the city takes a third. So the key is you got to keep the real estate circus and the hustle going.
Yeah.
If the hustle slows down, suddenly you can't pay for the city workers, you can't repair the potholes, you can't educate the students, you can't do whatever you got to do. So real estate is critical to every single thing we do. Now, anybody knows if you're going to do real estate, you probably need insurance. And if you need insurance, the insurance company needs to know what's going on in the building.
Yeah.
Prior to the Surfside collapse, the condo associations were effectively an authoritarian ruler or dictator. They wouldn't share information. And when they did share information, if you wanted to get a mortgage for your unit you were going to buy, the bank said, okay, fine, tell me about the condo. And the way it was dealt with was something called a condo questionnaire. It still exists today. The only underwriting the bank can really do other than comps is to ask the association to fill out this form. So you fill out this form. Now, the guy or the woman doing it, they could have been out partying last night. They could have tied one on. They get this form. What the hell? I want to go to lunch. Let me just fill it in. They send it off to the lender, and that's how the lender's underwriting it. So you had a real lack of information. You had a lack of transparency, and that's really the heart of what's happened since the collapse, and it's been driven by the insurance companies that want to underwrite and understand exactly what's going on in these buildings because they're the ones who are backstopping all of the condo associations, and the lenders are able to say now, listen, you can't get insurance. I'm not going to give you financing. So it's all kind of interrelated, and that's really where we're going. Where we're going is they want the building safe, but more importantly, you're going to see a lot of old buildings by our estimates, north of 60% of that $1.2 million condos, they're going to fall into a category which is basically an old ass condo. We're putting a nice name on it. We're calling it vintage
Yeah.
condo, but basically anything 30 years or more is effectively in the target and likely to get taken out if it's a desirable space, if it's near the coast. If it's out in the suburbs and nobody wants to be around there, the traffic's terrible and there's pawn shops and all this other stuff, those things are probably, they're going to meet their demise relatively soon. Why? Because if you can't get insurance, you can't get financing. You can't get financing, the only buyers are all cash. All cash pays a discount. And that's really kind of how it's probably going to play out as we go forward. Now, there's some other things involved with it, but let me tell you, 3 key points, and then I'll give it back to you. I don't mean to take over your show.
No, please.
Okay. Key point number 1 is every 10 years, a condo in Florida has to undergo something called a structural integrity reserve study. Okay, the acronym is SIRS. So if you hear people talking about SIRS, they're not talking about some flu you catch from a chicken and it leads to pneumonia. No, SIRS, Structural Integrity Reserve Study.
Okay.
It's a 2-part study. It has to be done now under the new law by a certified or licensed engineer or licensed architect. So basically for a SIRS, you call somebody in, licensed, they go around, they check it out, how's it look, whatever. They then come up with an idea. What's the lifespan of the roof? What's the lifespan of the elevator? What's the lifespan of the blah, 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 blah. They put it all together. They then take it to the reserve part. Structural integrity is let's check it out. Reserve is, okay, how much money do we need for the next 10 years? Because they do it every 10 years in order to pay for everything.
Right.
So, and then they put together a report, they give it to the condo board. Condo board members are volunteers. They don't get paid. They think they're smart, but they're not necessarily smart. They don't have to be qualified. They simply have to get enough votes, or they have to put their name in the hat because a lot of people don't want to serve on a board.
Right.
So these board members get it, and then they say, okay, well, let's see what it's going to cost. Okay, maybe we'll do it, maybe we won't. Prior to the collapse of Surfside, they could defer or kick the can based on what the experts told them needed to be done. And that's what happened at Surfside, according to the preliminary reports from the Fed. What happened is the board of directors was notified as to what they needed to do, and they said, we don't have the money. Our building is too old, our owners are too poor, or we're too cheap, and we're not going to pay for it. So that ultimately is why now, as of January the 1st of 2025, when you pass a budget and you have your SIRS, you now have to comply with whatever the experts are telling you. So that's done every 10 years. Now, one other one to keep in mind is called a milestone study. And you're saying, oh, what the hell is, I can't keep this straight. SIRS every 10 years.
Okay.
You think about like going to the doctor once a year and they're going to take your blood, you're going to, move your arm, bend over, blah, blah, blah. Something real simple. You do it in that little room that the doctor visits you at. Now, at the 25-year mark, at the 30-year mark, what's going to happen is you have to go in for the major evaluation.
Okay.
This is where you have to get that thing you're not looking forward to. Maybe you got to drink something at night, show up early, and then you pass out, and next thing you know, you feel like you've been violated. So, like, in other words, like a colonoscopy. So at the 30-year mark, that's when you're doing the big studies. That's when they're going to go in there and drill down and make sure everything is safe.
Okay.
Okay, so that happens at 30 years. So let me walk you through it. Every 10 years, year 10, based on certificate of occupancy anniversary, year 10, SIRS. Experts evaluate, they eyeball it, they tell you how much it's going to cost. You then have to pass the budget, and you have to put money into reserves to pay for it. Every 10 years. Year 10, you do it. Year 20, you do it. Year 30, you do a milestone. This is the big study. This is the one you're not looking forward to because it's going to be uncomfortable, but it's going to give you a great sense of what's going on. Then year 40, you're doing another SIRS, Structural Integrity Reserve Study.
Yeah.
If you're in Dade and you're in Broward, you also have to do something called the 40-year recertification.
Okay.
So that's where the 40-year recertification comes
Got
in.
it.
Now, what I will tell you is 40-year recertification, from everything I understand, was put in place after Hurricane Andrew hit in August of 1992.
Yeah.
And why was it put in place and why did all that stuff occur? Because insurance companies took a beating. They then forced the legislature in order to make changes so they could get a better handle on things. And because of that, we now have stronger building codes in Miami-Dade County and Broward than they do in the other 65 counties in Florida. So we're kind of ahead of the curve in terms of that, but now we're all dealing with what's going on. And because we're all having to deal with it, it's becoming a little bit problematic for those people who paid off their condos and they thought that their budget was simply going to be the maintenance.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden they're getting hit with these huge fees because work had been deferred, and now these buildings are simply getting too old. And I told you I'd tell you 3 points. Let me tell you the third. First one was SIRS, Structural Integrity Reserve Study. Second one was the milestone study, which is the one you're not looking forward to, where you drink the liquid and you show up in the morning and you feel violated afterwards. The third point to keep in mind is in Asia, in Hong Kong or Tokyo. I've been to Hong Kong. I haven't been to Tokyo, but there, density on that little island of Hong Kong, which is now part of mainland, now part of China. What's critical there is density and high rises. That's how they basically put all these people in a small little area. So as a result of that, over the course of time, and agree with them or disagree with them, they have applied effectively a shelf life to buildings. Their shelf life in Hong Kong is 60 years, according to press reports. So if we pull out and we say the insurance companies have really pushed the legislature to do a milestone study, the uncomfortable study, at year 30, that's the halfway point. So going forward, as all this gets settled, you have to ask yourself, will condo towers become a depreciating asset?
Yeah.
That's really the question. And then in South Florida, we're dealing with climate change and other things. So keep in mind, in June of 2021, when people were twerking on police cars and this building fell, that was probably a seminal moment for condominiums in the state of Florida, much like Hurricane Andrew was in August of 1992. And that's how we get to the cliff. And the cliff is what? Basically a repeat of what we were talking about with the VU or the view over on Brickell, where you're going to have people not paying, maybe because they don't want to or they can't. And lo and behold, there's going to be a few people within a building who are willing to pay, and they're going to have to bear or carry all of the stuff, all of the payments, all of the debt, all of the burden for those people who aren't. And that's likely where we're headed.
I see. Yeah. No. And thank you for explaining all of this. I come from the multifamily industry, so and as you know, I've been in multifamily for 20 years, managing over or owning over at my highest point about 800 units. Right now, I sold most of my multifamilies. I had to go through all these 40 years recertifications, which is what you just described, at least, which is from the perspective of structural, plumbing, and electrical. Now our company is managing over 5,500 units in 4 states, it's like these two things. I want to try to get your perspective on, because I know your specialty is condos, but obviously you know multifamilies. Is there any connection to this, or how do you see one thing affecting the other? What do you think with respect to that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I will tell you first and foremost, if the world thinks or the nation thinks about technology, they're thinking about Silicon Valley. That's where the best and brightest go there. That is like Rome in the heyday, if you will, for technology. I would make the argument that condos and high rises, residential, is South Florida, is Miami. This is the laboratory. This is when the R&D gets done. This is where the disasters occur. This is where the success is realized. And trust me, they burn the cash from the success at all the bars and everything else, and increasingly on OnlyFans, but that's a different story. but this is the laboratory. This is where R&D gets done for high rises and condos. Everybody plays here. Whether you're coming from the Middle East, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Dubai, which is where the new owner of that site where the tower collapsed is from, or you're coming from Latin America, or you're coming from Europe, or you're coming from anywhere. Everybody comes to Miami to sort of play the game. And why do they play the game here? Because if you look at our population, we're like 6.2 million people or so. We're looking at ballpark 42% foreign born in the Tri-County. Miami-Dade County alone, where Miami is, Miami Beach, you're looking at 54%. So what that means is it's a very comfortable place for people to play, but also to experiment and to invest. So kind of what happens here spreads throughout the country, and that's why it's so critical. So it might only begin with condos, but likely it's going to get picked up by others. Many of the rules and laws that have been put in place based on everything I've read, they're being adopted and implemented in places as far as Hawaii, Connecticut, all around the country. So we really are sort of setting the standard. We're the guinea pig, if you will. We're the ones going through. And we're, on the other side, it's going to turn out to be a better place, but it's going to be very painful in the meantime. Now, you asked about multifamily. I would tell you multifamily is going to do tremendously well. Why? Because a lot of these condos are going to be in such disrepair and or are going to have some challenges financially. People are going to need a place to stay. And chances are where they're going to go is they're going to be going in the multifamily. So I think it would be good, but I would just sort of tell you, and I'm not a contractor, not a licensed contractor. I talk to people and I read and I analyze. I can tell you there's basically no difference in most people's minds between a condominium and a rental. Now for your audience, the difference is you file paperwork with the state of Florida. It's called a declaration of condominium. It's about 300 pages. Some attorney charging $900 an hour takes out a template, simply does a search, find, replace all, puts in the new name of the condo, sends it up to the state, hits you up for $200,000 or so. Once the state approves it, the Florida Division of Condominiums, Timeshares, and Mobile Homes, once they approve it, They go ahead, they notify the property appraiser, and that same unit you were living in as a rental now suddenly becomes a condo. So that's all it is. It's a 300-page document called the Declaration of Condominium. So I don't see why everything applied to condominiums, which has this 300-page document that cost you $200,000 and some attorney did a find and replace on for his template. There's basically no difference between the two. So watch Condos. That's driven first and foremost because you have individual unit owners and you have insurance and you have other issues. But all of those same things, it's inevitable, will be applied to multifamily. And if they're not done by the legislature, they will be forced by the insurance companies.
Well, that takes me to my point. So to my next point, we're currently developing. Currently 1,300 units in Miami, multifamily.
Nice.
With one exception. I don't know if you saw the latest ad that we had on or the latest newsletter, but we got the Armani in Pompano, 28 units, luxury units. That's the exception to everything else that we're doing. We're really a multifamily company, and we're developing these 1,305 different projects right now. The biggest one being 644 units in Hialeah, and then the smallest one, 110 units in Fort Lauderdale, which we break ground in about 3 weeks.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's going really, really well. One of the things is insurance. I am scared shitless of doing condos on any piece of land. Like we have a parcel in near Brickell in which everybody that I've had a discussion about my vision of building a multifamily there is like, why don't you do condos? And to start off, I always look at this as an investor, really. Like, how would an investor would be interested in getting into this deal, whether they come into a multifamily deal or if they were buying condos. And one huge difference is insurance. The insurance for the same apartment, just like you described, I mean, it could be exactly the same building. It's more than double for condos than for multifamily. So, and property taxes are probably going to be around 30 to 40% more on condos than multifamily. So the same building, effectively. And the funny thing is, people end up buying that condo to rent it. So
that's the irony.
That's the irony. It's like, this is my investment. And then they buy it to rent it out and try to get a profit out of it. And I just don't follow because there's so many investors coming in and they want to park $500,000 somewhere and from everywhere, right? And they're like, okay, well, the easiest thing is like, I want to own my condo. And they buy into this and they don't do the math. They just don't do the math. They don't see how much they're paying in taxes, the mortgage. After everything is said and done, they probably, and if it's rented 100% of the time, they're probably gonna have to pay maybe $1,000 or $1,500 a month just to keep it afloat. So for us, that doesn't happen. We actually have a cash flow, fortunately, because we have economies of scale. We have less insurance. We have less property taxes. We manage that far more effectively than what the board that you just described, that people that don't get paid, that don't know really what they're doing, but they get voted into it. So, I mean, every time I see a condo option, I try to just shy away from it every possible way. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's a scary area. And with what you described, or let me take you to my point now. I'm sorry, I got rattled into this.
I have that effect.
Yeah. I underwrote already my third deal of smaller multifamilies, very well located, like maybe even on the water. One of them was 18 units. The other one was 24 units. I mean, smaller buildings, but condos, in which they're trying to all agree to sell.
Yeah, termination.
Terminate the condo.
And for the audience.
So tear it down. Yeah,
so for the audience. Remember I told you it's going to take like 6 months. You filed this 300-page document. You call some attorney who's banging you at $900 an hour. They're doing a find and replace and putting in a new name because the template's all set up. Now, in order to terminate it, that's all you simply do is you get a supermajority of the unit owners to all agree to sell, they put in place a third party. Third party has a fiduciary, which means they're going to represent the entity. And they go out and then they take it to market. And once they take it to market and they find a buyer, that fiduciary makes the decision. They notify the state. State pulls out that 300-page document. They rip it up. They notify the property appraiser. And lo and behold, the condo disappears and reverts back to a rental. Then the developer tears it down and they go vertical, which is what everybody's trying to do right now. I was working on 3 deals a year ago. The problem with a termination is everybody has a brother or a sister-in-law who's smarter than everybody else, and they tell you that the price you're getting is wrong. And because I put in this granite or this marble, and it's a special type of marble, I deserve more. The reality is nobody's going to buy one of these old-ass condos. Vintage condos. They're not going to buy a vintage condo for what you have inside. They don't care. They're going to buy it based on what can I build on it. And based on what I can build on it, I'm going to allocate 10 to 20% my overall construction cost or development costs towards land. And whatever that pencils out to, that's how much your unit is worth. And this is the part where the disconnect is from owners who are reading stories talking about what the place is worth versus what they're going to get offered on a termination type of deal, especially if you're out west. If you're out west, you're going to get shellacked. Nobody's going to want your property in the state, or if the state doesn't force you to do things, the insurance company will not give you insurance. Therefore, you will not get financing. Therefore, cash buyers will be the only one, and you will get into a doom loop in terms of pricing where it just kind of goes down and down and down.
Yeah, of course. And I was just invited to, I mean, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm developing land. I'm trying to stick to it, but I'm a deal junkie. So, of course, somebody says like, hey, Daniel, I have a great deal here. Why don't you buy some of these foreclosures that are happening in this particular building? Because it's going to be sold eventually as a to tear it down. But it's 200 units or something like that, and people are buying 5 here, 6 there, and if that's smarter, the person comes up and doesn't want to sell for whatever, then it kills the deal. Or am I wrong? Like, or what? How do you see those deals happening? Or
a lot of people are trying to do those deals. Some developers thought they had deals, that were going to close. I mean, I had my deal. Everything was signed. The problem is the president died. And then lo and behold, you had to go see, but this is what happens. Because keep in mind, the buildings that are likely to get terminated are going to be the first condos that were built. Florida condo law went in effect 1963, 1962 or so. So at first when they built it, who would want to live in an apartment building? Why am I going to spend money living in a condo? Was the thought process. So they offered all kind of amenities. Gave you a concierge, there was a restaurant, there's a marina. Now it's become like an essential, like a necessity to live in a condominium. But the old original ones, great locations, underutilized, likely to get terminated. How do you know if a building's going to get terminated if it's a candidate? Real simple. Under 100 units. Why? Because you don't have to herd that many cats as they're all running around talking to their brother-in-law about pricing. Point number 2, surface parking. If you park in the lot and you walk in the door, that's going to get torn down because it's underutilized. Third point, real simple, look at the balconies. If the balconies are not glass, chances are they don't have the cash, and or they're coming up on a big study where they're going to have to replace all the balconies, do a whole variety of things. So if you find under 100 units, surface parking, and a cement or some sort of rail balcony, and it's an older building, chances are it's going to get terminated if it's in a good location.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's going to help me underwrite. That's like 3 checks and that's it.
I mean, because the problem is there's too much. So what you got to do is you got to eliminate. Let me get rid of all this stuff, and if I'm going to get brain damage, do my due diligence, I want to know what I should sort of focus on, which kind of takes us back to your point talking about rentals. So there's something called the 1% rule in real estate. Some people say, it's a simpleton thing, don't listen to it, whatever. Well, it's a back of a napkin approach. Why? Because I want to eliminate, because there's so much stuff to look at. Let me see where I should do. So the 1% rule is real simple. So your rent ought to be 1% of what you paid. Simple. So you buy a $100,000 place, you need $1,000 a month in rent. So the next time you're in an event and you hear somebody tell you they paid $400,000 for their condo, now it's worth $1 million. You ask them, how much can you rent it for? And if the person tells you $400,000, it's not $1 million condo, it's a $400,000 condo. And that is the come to religion moment that's coming for a lot of people. I do a conversation with various groups, whether it be Wall Street or others. We were kind of talking, and I believe because it's faith, not based on anything. I believe we're going back to 19. I think if you're going to underwrite a deal today, go back to 19 pricing. I think everything that occurred within the last 5 years basically was like a python in the Everglades that's swallowing a hog.
Yeah.
It's working its way through the system. All indications are we're going back to 19 in terms of valuations. Then you need to discount off of 19 is what I would tell you. But I took the 1% rule and I applied it to the summer buying season in South Florida, which basically goes from May through October. Let's call it the wet season, if you will.
Right.
Okay. So the wet season. So we ran those numbers. We took the rentals, and what we found is South Florida wide, 1%. Our condo prices are 127% overinflated.
Sorry, what percent
Yeah,
again?
127%. Now, if you look at Dade County, you look at north of 180%. You look at Palm Beach County, you look at about 116%.
Okay.
What's the best value on the street right now? Broward County, 55%. Based on the 1% rule. Now, this is a macro approach, but that being said, there's so much to look at. Like you said, I'm getting all these deals. I would argue to many, you start with the 1% rule. If it makes sense, then you dig in. Then you worry about ROIs, a stack, whatever you want to worry about. But this is a way to eliminate, because otherwise you're gonna waste so much time. You're not gonna get anything done. It'll be paralysis by analysis.
I completely agree. In development, at least the ones that we're doing right now, and of course, we got a little help with Live Local with the property taxes.
Nice. Well, and that's gonna have a big effect as well.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that as well. But we are getting really close to the 1% with the current rents that we're renting on the new buildings that we're building. So I completely agree. I mean, I do not understand how a sophisticated investor from Argentina, Colombia, wherever, that they are business people, and they even have real estate back at their home, and then they come here and buy something for $800,000 that they can rent for $4,000.
Well, I'll give you 2 points on that. One,
Sure.
one point is the former head of condominiums for Related Group, which is the largest vertical condo developer
Right.
in Florida, and this is the George Perez Related Group. It's not the Stephen Ross Related
Right,
Group,
right.
because now they're kind of competing.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, they're supposedly they're good, whatever, but the Stephen Ross. So, guy's name is Carlos Matos.
Okay.
Carlos got pushed out because George Perez, the chairman, wanted his kids to sort of take over. So Carlos left or whatever. So Carlos is kind of developing now, and he kind of makes the argument that we're a community in which we've hit critical mass. We've hit cruising altitude, much like Los Angeles did in the 1950s.
Yeah.
So there was a time when a bunch of New York sports teams moved from the New York City area out to Los Angeles because it was up and coming and it was growing and the potential was there, and we were going to have stability. We weren't going to have these big booms and busts.
Yeah.
Carlos argues that Miami especially has hit that critical mass. So anything we're going to see sort of going forward, it's not going to be as dramatic as everything we experienced before. Now, that was before this whole condo cliff thing, which is
Right.
2025. So I think that's sort of something to keep in mind as you're looking at the market. Maybe we're no longer a minor league amateurish market, which gave me the opportunity back in 2006
Yeah.
to kind of play in that game.
Yeah.
Now Wall Street's starting to come down here, but then I would ask those people like Jeff Bezos is here and everyone else. Elon Musk is looking at condo.
Yeah.
Well, Elon Musk might be different, but my argument is, are they here for business? Ken Griffin from Citadel. Are they here for business, or are they here like every other elderly person who was successful during the course of their lifespan
Right.
and retired to Florida? And that's really the part we have to try to figure out. Are we taking the next step, like Ken Griffin said, we're going to surpass New York, or are they simply doing the same thing that they've been doing since the 1920s when you
Yeah.
got old and you wanted warm weather because the cold weather wasn't good for you, so you come to Florida and then you say, I'm going to set up a business, so I got tax write-offs. So that's the part I don't know.
That was going to be my next question to you. Is like, what do you think it's really going to happen with Miami? But and
Well-
let me add a little wrench in there as
Yep,
well,
please.
because we talked multifamily condos. How do houses fit into this as well? Like, what do you envision like happening to Miami with that question that you
Yep.
just said? No, but I still want to ask.
So I mean, I was a journalist a long time. I dealt with a lot of these developers that I pissed off most of them.
Yeah.
Banks. We're recording this
yeah.
in the building of a bank, which, loved me when I was a reporter because I, basically sort of straight talk. What's going on with single family? Well, in my world, single family house is a work of art and a condo is a commodity. And what do I mean by that? A house, the lot shape will be different. The interior could be different. How many floors it is? Where's the tree? Does it flood in front? Does it not? How far is it for the kid to walk to school or the school bus? Whatever. They're all different. They're all unique. They're all special. And therefore, it's not interesting to study them. It's more like collecting art, if you will. Now, a condo, they're all the same, especially when you get in the high rises. You got the first 8 floors is going to be a pedestal. You're going to have parking garage. Ground floor will be the entrance. You'll have some retail. You'll sprinkle in some lofts or some townhouses, so-called townhouses, put some office space. Get to the 8th floor. You got your swimming pool. You got your amenities. Then you go vertical after that. They're all the same. 909 unit, and let's say there's 12 units per floor.
Yeah.
909 has got the same damn layout as 2709 as 4909. So therefore, you can trade these condos based on, you know, like you would trade petroleum, or like you would trade orange juice, or you would trade coffee, whatever the case may be. So I think where we're going is this. Houses will be highly sought after. They're not going to necessarily be manageable, much like if you go to the Miami Beach on the Barrier Island and you try to own a house there, the carrying cost, the burn associated with it is extensive. And because of that, I think increasingly houses are going to be extremely challenging. Now, but from my perspective, when you're in South Florida here, we got Interstate 95, which runs north-south. And I've always been interested in coastal South Florida, which is where we did our focus with the condos. Now, the reason we were interested in that is that it was like going back to the 1980s before we had high-frequency trading and using the Robinhood app on your phone, or Charles Schwab app where you could trade stocks. Back then, they would get in a trading pit, and if the hands were out, they were selling, hands were in, they were buying. So when you're east of 95, these are traders. These are speculators. They don't care about a family of 4 and a dog. They don't care about diaper prices. When you get in houses, now we have real people. What does insurance cost? How much is gas? How much is eggs? How much is all that stuff? So these are real people. Now what's happened is as these real people increasingly lose their jobs or they can't make ends meet, they lose them. They lose the properties, and who acquires them? It's going to be an investment type of entity that's rolling up and building portfolios. So where we're going with houses is if you got a house and you can afford to maintain it because your insurance is going up. Those hurricanes that hit on the west coast of Florida, you're going to be paying on the east coast of Florida. There's no question about it. In fact, if you look at what the insurance costs are, they're substantial. It's so significant. That's why many people who, if they can pay off their house, they're simply not getting insurance, and they're rolling the dice saying, okay, if I get hit hard, all the money I saved all those years, I'm going to be fine. And even if you do have insurance, the deductible is so substantial, chances are, you know, you're not going to be able to make it covered. So a house will be a luxury. It's a work of art. It'll be something people collect, is what I think. Condo is going to be a necessity. It's no longer what it used to be, where it was like concierge and a marina. So we're really sort of changing in that way. You know, in terms of Miami-Dade and Broward County, Palm Beach County, there's still, you know, there's not as many people, and as you go through the rest of the state, you know, there's nobody there, and you can't justify condos.
What's your vision? I mean, with respect to Miami in general. I mean, come on, like you were describing the $9 beers at a shithole, really.
Which is kind of where I like to drink. I like the shitholes.
But where's this going? I mean, like, do you think
it's going back to 19? It's 100% going back to 19. There's no question we're going back to 19. So anybody, listen, this is a message to the audience. If you think your place is worth $1 million and it was worth 5 years ago $300,000, if you don't want to sell it because it's your dream home, I encourage you to lever the hell out of it. Put as much debt on that damn thing as possible. Why? Because if the market corrects, the bank's not going to want it back. They're simply not going to want it back. That was a strategy that was used back during the Great Recession. If you know, it's the, not to talk politics, but it's a Donald Trump approach. The more debt you have, it's not the person who owes the money who has the power. Excuse me. It's not the person that's owed the money has the power. It's a person who owes the money who controls the whole situation. So if you want to hedge, you know, you want to hedge it, simply lever it up, put a lot of debt on it, and nobody's going to want it back. Take the cash out and use it for a defense fund against a foreclosure.
I completely agree. I mean, I kind of did that inadvertently with my buildings back in 2006, and what ended up happening is I was able to get, you know, on a one-on-one. There was 3 banks that I was owing money. I remember I was owing about $21 million, and I remember this one night that before even looking at my debt, I said, okay, if I were to sell these buildings, how much are they really worth? And I knew because this is cap rate based or per unit value based or
Yeah, this is
whatever.
as far
So-
as more sophisticated than 1% rule.
Exactly. So yeah, but it takes you there anyway.
Yeah,
Then-
100%.
So I get there and I'm like, okay, 16 million. Okay, how much do we owe? 21 million. So I was in for $5 million there that I even did the math. If I would get a $300,000 job, how long would I take to pay that off? I cried.
Yeah, of
I mean,
course.
I didn't know what to do.
But you didn't have the battle scars you do today. Now you know. It's just a little, it's
Well, fortunately, my brother, did you know him? He's a real estate attorney. He has helped me through this. But we sat down with these banks and we said exactly what you just mentioned. It's like, I'm the best possible property manager for this. You want it back?
100%.
Just slash the debt by 30, 40%. Don't charge me interest for 4 years, and I'll get that money back to you. And that's exactly what we did. By 4 or 5 years later, I was able to pay every single back. No foreclosures.
Listen, what you did is the legendary story of the Great Recession in Miami. George Perez, again, the chairman of the Related Group, at the time, he was putting up, I don't know, there's north of 20,000 units tri-county wide vertical. He was putting them up. The market went to hell.
Yeah.
This was after Lehman Brothers failed. We began the Great Recession, yada, yada, yada. So the legend goes, and Miami Herald wrote about this, George Perez called all of his lenders into a conference room over at the Hyatt, downtown Miami, called them all in, had guys bring in all the keys. Could have been women carrying the keys too. I don't know. All the bankers are sitting at this conference table. This is like King Arthur type of stuff.
Yeah.
They bring in all the keys, and he says, listen, I'm giving everybody back their buildings. Here's your keys. We'll do a deed in lieu. We'll do whatever. And some of the banks were like, that's the last thing we want. We don't want to manage the damn building. So he said, okay, will you hire me for a management fee and I'll run it. Now, many of the banks worked with him. There were a couple examples where they did not work with him. One of them was up in West Palm Beach, Scotia Bank. They decided to take it back, and they were going to do something, sell it to somebody else. People who bought it, they weren't able to dump it.
Yeah.
So the reality is it's better to stick with who brought you rather than to try to find someone new, because the person who got you there, chances are they're going to grind through and get you to the other side.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. Let me give you one more topic, and not to get political here, but you can. Is we have Live Local.
Yep.
And we have now Trump in the government.
Yep.
I don't know any others things like, how do you see these different things that are happening on the political side that may affect real estate one way or the other?
Yeah, so I think what we're come to realize over the course, I've been here since '93, so I've been basically here right after Andrew hit, and I will tell you that the legislature is driven by insurance companies. The state is driven by real estate because, again, no state income tax. And
Right.
if you look at the coffers, if you consider back during the Great Recession, City of Miami's credit rating was junk bond status because prices have fallen so much that in order for the city of Miami to get municipal bonds and everything else, they had to buy like a huge rate because they were high risk, because the only way to generate cash was off of real estate. So I will tell you, real estate and insurance drive it all. All the politics is basically to make you feel good or get you revved up or piss you off. There's nothing really to the politics. I mean, the private sector, in my opinion, is going to drive it, and that'll be real estate, and that will be insurance. Now, I will warn you, all these single-family houses that everybody's so confident in, a lot of people make their money off the condo game. So they live in a house, but they're making money off the condo game. How is that? Maybe they're driving the truck to deliver the tile for the flooring of the penthouse. Maybe they're doing the financing. Maybe they're doing the title. Maybe they're doing interior design. Many of these people, so if the condo market goes sideways, watch for the impact and repercussion to hit in the single family, because that's their bread and butter, if you will.
Of course. So the trickle-down effect.
Yeah, it trickles down. So that's where that east of 95, where you kind of play,
Yeah.
but you live, the real people live west of 95. That's how it's all impacted. And the other thing we don't know is Airbnb. Airbnb is sort of that, there's something called Air DNA, I think is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it
Air
tracks
DNA,
tracks all the Airbnbs. So what I will tell you is the amount of product that apparently has been acquired by Airbnb types or home sharing types is so significant that if and when we get these huge insurance costs or we do get a pullback in pricing, what's the easiest property to walk away from? The one you're not living in.
Of course.
So, they're potentially, we're not that far away. It wouldn't take much, in other words, for the spigot of product to be dumped onto the market, and we're increasingly seeing that occur. Right now, pricing is holding firm, but supply is definitely in a buyer's market pool.
Yeah.
There's some realtors will tell you, well, it's short term, it's a blip or so. Again, I argue we go back to 19, and if you're looking to buy, take 19 pricing and discount it for whatever you think it's worth in order to pull the trigger. But if you're evaluating stuff off 2024, I think you're probably not going to want to see me.
Well, Peter, thank you very much. I don't know if you have final thoughts, something that you want to share with the public, anything that maybe I didn't ask or.
Yeah. I mean, the easiest thing is if you're an investor, use the 1% rule.
Yeah.
Why? Eliminate. $100,000 property needs $1,000 a month. Real simple. Eliminate stuff, and then when you roll up your sleeves and do your due diligence, you talk to the people. Make sure it's something that's got potential, and don't change flash. You don't want flash. If you are an investor, small is good. Studios, awesome. 1 bed's okay. 2 beds, 3 beds, no way in hell. 3 bed, you ought to be in a house. What's a townhouse? It's half pregnant. Nobody wants a townhouse. They settle for it. They can't afford a house. Condo's too big. So some fundamental stuff. Human nature is very predictable. And just kind of run with human nature. And probably the final point, what's going on with financing? What does it mean? I don't know. What's my mortgage rate? Let me give you a real simple way to do it. Something called a 10-year treasury. Look up something called 10-year treasury. Ask Alexa, ask Google, what's 10-year treasury? Put 3 points on it. That's the mortgage rate. Real simple. You don't need a mortgage broker to tell you that. Whatever. They're all going to put junk fees in there. 10-year treasury plus 3, that's your interest rate. And right now, interest rate is too high in mortgages. And as a result, people don't want to pull the trigger. Probably has to be ballpark south of 5% in order to make it happen. The problem is inflation's running at 3+%. So we got a little bit of a disconnect going on.
Well, again, very valuable the last minute. Thank you very much, Peter. And again, thank you for joining us. I know we're going to cross paths so many different ways in so many beers as well. So
100%. But I'm not paying $9 for a beer. No way in hell. And watch the happy hours. I'm telling you, watch the happy hour. Anybody happy houring, they need cash flow.
Yeah, totally. Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure.